welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. I always see this conference in Twitter, and I get that FOMO for being here. So I'm very happy to be here finally. My name is Eva. I'm going to be talking about accessibility, but not in the most common way. This is not this is how you do accessibility talk, which are talks that I love, so don't get me wrong. But this is more about, good intentions gone bad. It's about my history with accessibility and my good intentions in trying to improve and making more accessible websites and making it worse. So it's about failed assumptions, myths, things that I believe that were correct and were actually very bad. It's basically a thing of you don't have to learn from your mistakes if you can learn from mine kind of thing. So I hope you enjoy it. Warning, this is a work in progress. We all know we will keep on making mistakes, so I will definitely add more things soon. All right. I will hopefully leave you with 5 lessons. The first one is to know about accessibility personas. Then we will go into why we should care for the simplest things. Fixing accessibility shouldn't be a very difficult thing. You will notice that the simple things that you can fix are the quickest and are also the most impactful. Then we will talk about how people mean well, which is honestly my favorite part. Because sometimes when we take a look at the statistics of accessibility, we are very let down on how bad everything is. And the reality is that people mean well, sometimes it's, it doesn't work like we hope for. Then we learn how to test so we can avoid having that very sadness of number 3. And then we will talk about accessibility ownership. Who should be owning accessibility? So let's go into the first one, accessibility personas and understanding disabilities and assistive technologies. When I first got into accessibility, all I could think of is accessibility for blind people, which it is, but it is so much more than that. So the first thing that I want us to talk about is what is a disability. And I want to show you this definition by the World Health Organization. A disability is a failed interaction between the environment and a person with a medical condition. So let's take this into something real. For example, we have a building. The building is environment, and then we have a person with a medical condition who is currently on a wheelchair. If the building has a stairs and it doesn't have a ramp, that person won't be able to go into the building. So we have a failed interaction. And when the failed interaction happens, that's when the disability gets created. So there was no disability at all until there was a failed interaction between this person and the environment. So when we, as web creators, developers, designers, make things inaccessible, we are creating barriers, we are creating disabilities. We don't mean to do that, but that's what happens. Take into account that people with different medical conditions or people with the same medical condition might react differently to different solutions. So be reminded that this is a diverse group of people with a wide range of needs. There is no one solution fits them all. So you need to work towards that. If you ever wonder, 16% of the world's population has a permanent disability, which honestly for me is a huge number. That number honestly keeps increasing all the time due to many different things, among them social, economics, warfare, population getting old, simply. So there are many reasons why, but that number keeps on increasing. If you saw me talking about accessibility 5 years ago, that number was 15, now it is 16. It will keep on increasing. Now, for me, that is a large enough number to, work on that. But some people, especially sometimes when you go and talk with company people who are on a C-level, they don't find that number big enough to care. So you have to go with a different point of view to talk about them and convince them that everybody should be investing in accessibility. So what you do is you show them this wonderful chart that you probably saw somewhere else in Twitter already, that's a chart by the Microsoft Accessibility team. And it talks about the different categories of disabilities like touch, see, hear, and speak. But it also categorizes things in time. So you have permanent, which is the one that we usually talk about. That's the 16% that we usually know. And then you have temporary and situational. So a very quick example is someone who is deaf or hard of hearing will use technology in a different way. Perhaps they will watch a Netflix movie with captions on. But what about someone who has an ear infection? That is not permanent. That's a few days, perhaps a week or two. And during that time, that person won't be hearing very well. So they will probably turn on captions. What about me, whose native language is in English, and I'm watching a movie? Well, I will probably put on captions to feel more comfortable. And it will be, one situation of 2 hours. The movie finishes and that's it. But I will enjoy that technology for me to be more comfortable. And it was a technology that was created for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So when we talk about the 16%, it is the basis. But we are actually making accessibility an improvement for pretty much every person in the room. Now, I know it's not time for lunch, but I love showing pictures of empanadas. This is an empanada. It's a very common meal in Argentina and in Latin America. And there is a very specific way of eating at them. And I swear this has a meaning with accessibility. So how do you eat an empanada? You don't use a knife and fork or you will be kicked out of the country. You wrap it as if it were a baby and you hold it in one hand. So empanadas are a very common meal for lunch when you have to work at your laptop and eat at the same time. So you hold the empanada on one hand, and then with the other one, you try to use the laptop. And all of us have eaten our lunch and work at the same time. It's very messy. It doesn't work very well. And usually it doesn't work very well because you're trying to use your keyboard with only one hand. You're trying to use a mouse, and then things don't work as expected. So what I mean is, if only websites had better keyboard navigation, perhaps I could eat my empanadas more in peace, And this is a privilege of mine, complaining about eating empanadas and working at the laptop. But for many people, it's not a privilege. They actually cannot work on their laptops unless they are keyboard friendly. So let's dive into assistive technologies a little bit. And I mean a little bit because I only want to talk about one very specific assistive technology that sometimes we forget about. The most common accessibility technology when it comes to us, web developers, what is the most important assistive technology out there? Drum roll. The keyboard. The keyboard is a tool that people with visual impairments and with motor impairments will use the most. If you have someone who doesn't see very well, they will probably not go into the trackpad, they will probably not use the mouse, they will probably go and use a keyboard. If you have a screen reader user, they will use a keyboard. If you have a motor impairment person, someone perhaps who cannot move their hands or their fingers very well, or has arthritis, and every time they use their fingers, it hurts, well, they probably won't use the mouse. They will prefer to use a keyboard. If you have someone who is on a wheelchair and can only move their head, perhaps they are using systems like sip and puff, where you blow into a tube and you send signals that are very straight to the computer, or perhaps you are only hitting one key at a time, very slowly. So those things leading to the keyboard and keyboard navigation being pretty much the main assistive technology out there that we need to be very careful about. Now let's dive into Lesson 2. Lesson 2 is that simple things tend to have the biggest impact. When I began, I was thinking, okay, accessibility is for blind people. I went all into ARIA and screen readers. And I forgot, honestly, to prioritize keyboard navigation over screen readers, which didn't make much sense because screen reader users will most probably use the keyboards. So if the keyboard navigation doesn't work, they will probably not be able to use a screen reader at all. So begin your accessibility journey by going into the most simple and impactful things, such as color contrast, semantics, keyboard navigation. Take a look at how outlines work on your website and how skip navigation links are. And I will dive a little bit into those two. So outlines, you know them. They are those blue things that show up when you use your keyboard. And what they do is they tell the user where they are at, what they are about to do when they hit enter. They are extremely useful. They are technically the cursor of keyboard navigation users. By the way, this is a great talk by Laura Carvajal. You can see it on YouTube in Frontiers. It's amazing. So the thing that I get all the time when I talk about outlines is that they are ugly. Yes, they are. But they don't have to be. They don't have to be the default. You can change them, and that's okay. You can do something like this, where it pops up in a beautiful purple color. Or you can do something like that, because it doesn't have to be squares. It can be whatever that shape it is. You can modify them, and that's okay. So you can make them pretty, more ugly, or you can even make them match your brand color. Now, for skip navigation links, this is something that perhaps not everybody is familiar with, but it's something that pops up at the same time, at the first time that you hit tab on a website. So when we discover that this is a keyboard navigation user, we show a skip navigation link. The reason why is because if you're a keyboard user, and perhaps it takes you a lot of time to get through the website, what you need to do, imagine you want to go to the About Me page. You will have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tabs, 7 keys that you had to press. For me, it is no issue. I can press tab 7 times. I mean, it will get boring after a few pages, but I can do that. But for people who are actually struggling by pressing a key, then 7 times, all the times that you have to go through a website, that gets a little bit too much. So that's where skip navigation links come in. With the skip navigation links, what you can do is you can offer an option to skip navigation and move the focus down. So that is a very easy thing to do, is 2 lines of HTML, around 7 lines of CSS, no JavaScript. And that's it, and you improve the life of keyboard navigation users so much. So, low syntax, low code. That's it. But sometimes simple is not that simple. Code dev just call it, wants your happiness back. I had this horrible experience where I worked at a cryptocurrency company where they were very much into microservices, and they wanted to build their own front-end framework. It didn't went well. So they had like 50 repositories. It would take you like 20 to 30 gigabytes of RAM just to run the application. And everything was everywhere. So I remember I wanted to change the link color because it didn't have good contrast with the background. And I went in there and I took a look at the code in all the 50 repositories. And I realized it would take me like 3 to 4 weeks to change a link color. So I was like, yeah, okay, you know what? I'm going to just drop it. Sometimes that happens. So do try to prioritize, and try to prioritize on impact and how easy something is to solve. On impact, you will know because some things are a big deal. And on how easy something is to solve, you will know because you know your code base best. So big impact and easy to solve goes first. Then you will mix it with a small impact and easy to solve, those quick hits that you can make on a Friday to feel good and then you're week with a happy face. Then you can do something like big impact and hard to solve. Those things need a little bit more planning. Perhaps you can break it to sprint planning or to the beginning of the quarter and talk about that with your team. And then for things that have a small impact and are hard to solve, you can leave them at the end, and someday someone will take care of that. So lesson number 3 is about people mean well, most of the times. And I want to tell you 2 stories about this. The first story is about ARIA labels. And people in general have a tendency to write a lot of ARIA labels. And I'm going to be speaking about Infobae, which is a news website from Argentina, and React Testing Library a little bit. So Infobae is a news website where you will be able to see news in Argentina, Latin America, and all that. And it has this menu, that I want us to talk about. So that menu, if you look at the code, it looks like this. So it has a div, it could be a nav, but it's a div, that's okay. And it has a few A tags, which are okay, with the href and the name in the middle. If you're a non-screen reader user, you will see exactly what's in there marked in yellow. So you will see the bases, newsletter, and all that. But if you're a screen reader user, you won't get that information. You will get the area label. So if it were a screen reader, the screen reader would read link, header nav link, link, header nav link, etc., etc., etc. The area label overrides values. So that is a huge issue, because that means that they have completely broken the website for screen reader users. But their intentions were good, because why wouldn't you use an area label if not to make something more accessible? But the thing is, this is sad. And I don't have a connection with the people from Infobyte to ask them, hey, what did you do that? But I noticed something very similar in a company that I used to work for, where they use area labels like they were IDs. And I was able to go and ask my fellow developers, why did you do that? And they answer. They say, well, we use React Testing Library. And React Testing Library allows us to select elements using area labels. And if I use an area label, I do something for accessibility. So 2 for 1, I use area labels, good for accessibility, and good for my unit test. Their intentions were good. They sadly broke a lot of things without even knowing. So to area the cause of and solution to oral accessibility problems. Now, take a look at that article if you haven't seen them already, but that article explains why you probably shouldn't use ARIA at all. If Infobyte wouldn't have used ARIA, it would work perfectly. The HTML was perfect without any ARIA. Okay, story number 2 is about every image should have an alternative text. And I am guilty of this quite a lot. The thing is, there are rules for alternative text. Not every image needs an alternative text. The rules are that the alt attribute is indeed compulsory, but it can be empty if the image is decorative. So you can do just quotes, and that's okay. That's fair, that's legal, perfect. You do not have to be redundant, which is something that it was hard for me to learn. If you have a picture of a cat, you don't need the alternative text to be picture of a cat, because the screen reader will already say image of or a picture of. So otherwise, it will be redundant. It will say image of cat. And then if it has an action, describe the action, not the image. So if you have a logo, and the logo is a link that goes to your homepage, do go to homepage. You don't need to describe the logo. You need to describe the action. There is a wonderful accessibility alternative text decision tree by the Web Accessibility Initiative, and that I usually have in my bookmarks because it's amazing. You go answer yes or no questions, and you can figure out what's the right accessibility alternative text for your images. It's very good. So, remember when I say that most people mean well? Most is not everyone. Not everybody means well. So the story of the SEO in the room, and how every image had the same alternative text. A long, long time ago, I used to work at a digital agency, and we had this company. It was the biggest company of credit cards in Argentina working with us, and we were building their website. And the search engine optimization person of that company wanted to use the name of the brand, the name of their company, as an alternative text to every image in the website. To which, of course, I explained, that's not the idea of alternative text. To which she was like, yeah, whatever. So every image in that website ended up being, that company name that I'm not going to say. It is what it is. Sometimes you try, sometimes you convince people, and sometimes you simply cannot. And you want to keep your job, of course. So lesson number 4 is about testing correctly. Having 98 out of 100 on Lighthouse won't really save you. It's good that you use that, but it's not enough. There is a great talk by Ian Pouncey from a couple of years ago in which he build a very, very, very inaccessible website and got 100 out of 100. Because you can do that. You can cheat on the system. In fact, Infobae gets 98 of 100, but their website is completely useless for people with screen readers. And they get a very good amount of, congratulations. That's why they haven't fixed it in 4 years. So let's do manual test. And for manual test, what I would really recommend you to do is mostly keyboard navigation and screen readers. If you are not familiar with screen readers, begin with keyboard navigation. That is good enough. That's a good start. And then what do we test is very important. You are doing manual tests, so my recommendation would be to test user stories. Can a user with this assistive technology do this action? For example, can a user with keyboard navigation create an account? Can a user with a screen reader add a product to the cart? Can a user watch this video using captions? So by doing that, what you do is you humanize your users, which are at the end of the day humans. And you make sure that you're testing for people. You're not just checking things on a list. You're actually making sure that real user scenarios are possible. And then there's automated tests, which are equally important and are a little bit more simple sometimes to do because they don't require that amount of time as manual testing. Automated tests are based on something called WCAG that no one ever decided how to pronounce. Whatever you want is good, as long as you kind of know what it means and how to use it. So WCAG is a set of rules created by W3C a long, long time ago at the end of the 90s. And it's a standard in the industry. It's basically what gives the foundation for accessibility laws all around the globe. And there has, different success criteria based on many different things. What you want to get is no errors. When you run an accessibility test, the one thing that you want is to have everything all right. But that's not necessarily the reality. If you want to use an automated tools, I recommend these few. Axcore by DQ is the most popular one. Lighthouse Mabel. Mabel is the company I work on that has an accessibility testing tool as well. Lighthouse and Mabel are actually built based on Axe. And then there's a storybook add-on that is also based on Axe that you can use if you have a design system. So add these to your pipelines and, CI/CD should fail if it doesn't meet the requirements. You just don't skip the failure in CI/CD. You take a look at that and you fix it. How many websites do you think that pass with absolutely no errors? This is a 5, 10, 40%. Who says only 5% pass? I didn't put 0 as an answer, but that is a very much of a possibility. Who says 20? Oh my God, there's Eva. This is a very not positive audience. Who says 40? Yeah. Well, 4.1. Yeah, it is. 4.1 websites are the percentage of websites that have absolutely no error is in automated test. It's a very sad number. The good news, is that it has been improving. Across years, it has been improving. As you can see, I could zoom in a little bit. It has been improving around 0.5 a year. So in 200 years, we should be fine. That's okay. We can do better. So if you take a look at that analysis, the most common issues are very easy to fix. Low contrast text, missing alternative text, missing form labels, empty links, empty buttons, and missing document languages. Sometimes I do get this, it's too hard, accessibility is too hard, it takes too much time. Changing a color, except from that, the company I used to work for, changing a color is usually not a very, 3 to 4 weeks work. It's usually a very simple thing and it has a great impact. Adding alternative text, using the right language for, websites, which is an extremely important thing. If you do not add the lang attribute to HTML, websites that are not in English are spoken in English when they use a screen reader, which is, I experience Spanish spoken as English on a screen reader, and I can assure you, you don't get a word, even if you know Spanish. So they are very, very simple to fix. And lesson number 5, the last one, is about accessibility, ownership, and team effort. Now, a long, long time ago, I also worked at another company, the same one for that, create microservices for everything, 50 repositories. That very same company, the CEO, the CEO was very much into neomorphism, but so much. He was sending links and images of neomorphisms to the designer all the time. The designer was, poor thing, she was very sad. And we were trying to explain to the CEO, why, that's very good for the dribble shot, but that's not usually what you do for, real website, because there's no way to make that accessible. It doesn't matter how much area you put in there, it will not be accessible. So you cannot really outcode bad design. It begins in design. And accessibility is a team effort because it also begins at planning. You need to plan time for that. Otherwise, it will never get done. Otherwise, you will ship your product, and then suddenly you will have accessibility tech debt, which is something that shouldn't exist, but kind of does, because not planning for it is also kind of a conscious decision, and not making time for accessibility is a conscious decision. So what if you made a mistake? What if you were, going all into accessibility, you realize now, oh my God, I put so many areas as IDs. That's okay, that's all right. You try again, so you finish this wonderful conference, and then you go back on Monday to work, and you say, okay, I'm going to remove those areas with IDs because now I know they are not correct. Now, that is honestly a little bit easier said than done. I personally don't handle mistakes very well. I am still struggling with the one thing that I broke 2 years ago when I broke production. I still remember about that. That's what it is. I saw a very great talk a year ago called Befriending the Disruptor, and it was a talk about unconscious bias and all that. And it had a very important part about lessons on learning. And it said that mistakes are temporal, localized, and changeable. So mistakes are something that will happen to us all the time, forever. We will keep on making mistakes. But it's important to remember that there are something temporal that you will be able to change, and there are something that are localized in one small scope, and once you fix it, that's it. You learn from it, and you move on. So you don't need to be always right, but do try to, aim to make new mistakes instead of repeating old ones. Aim not to make the mistakes that I did. Do your own. And remember that you really need to try, and you really need to care. What's important about accessibility is a little bit of empathy, is a little bit of understanding. And with that, you will be fine. So thank you very much.